The GPS tracker beeped twice in Gareth Langley's pocket as he watched his wife kiss another man through the rain-streaked window of the lakeside motel. The man was his sister's husband. Gareth didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there in the October drizzle, watching Rowena's hands tangle in Caleb Renner's hair, the same way they used to tangle in his own. The same way they had 3 nights ago, when she'd whispered she loved him before falling asleep. The tracker had been in Caleb's Honda for 2 weeks. Gareth installed it after finding hotel receipts in his wife's purse. Receipts she claimed were for work conferences that didn't exist. He'd called the logistics company where she worked. No conferences, no business trips, just lies wrapped in her sweet smile and served with morning coffee. He pulled out his phone and took 17 pictures. The camera clicked softly in the rain. When Caleb's hands moved to the small of Rowena's back, Gareth finally turned away. He walked to his truck, climbed inside, and sat in perfect silence for 4 minutes. Then he drove home to make dinner for their 9-year-old son, Louis, who was waiting with homework spread across the kitchen table. "Where's Mom?" Louis asked, without looking up from his math worksheets. "Working late," Gareth said. "Pasta okay?" "Yeah." Gareth boiled water and opened a jar of marinara sauce. He helped Louis with fractions. He loaded the dishwasher. He read bedtime stories about talking animals and brave knights, all while the pictures on his phone burned like acid in his pocket. At midnight, Rowena came home with wet hair and guilt perfume. "How was your meeting?" Gareth asked from the couch. "Long. Boring." She kissed his forehead. "You're sweet for waiting up. Always do." She went upstairs. Gareth stayed on the couch until dawn, staring at the ceiling and making lists in his head. Lists of what he knew. Lists of what he needed to know. Lists of what came next. The water treatment plant hummed with familiar rhythms the next morning. Gareth checked chlorine levels and monitored filtration systems while his coworkers complained about overtime and vacation schedules. Normal Tuesday conversations that felt like they were happening underwater. "You look like hell," said Marcus, the senior operator. "Rowena keeping you up?" "Something like that." Gareth's phone buzzed. A text from his sister Maura. "Family dinner Sunday? Caleb's making his famous chili." He typed back, "Sounds good. Famous chili." Caleb Renner was famous for a lot of things in their small town near Rochester. Vice principal at the middle school, youth soccer coach, deacon at St. Matthew's Presbyterian, the kind of man people trusted with their children and their secrets. Gareth had trusted him with more than that. He'd co-signed Caleb's car loan when the bank said no. He'd helped cover legal fees when Caleb got his DUI 2 years ago, a mistake that could have ended his career if it became public. Gareth had made calls, pulled strings, kept quiet, because that's what family did. Now family was screwing his wife in motel rooms. After work, Gareth drove to a strip mall on the east side of town. The phone repair shop was wedged between a nail salon and a check cashing place. Tommy Vance, the owner, had gone to high school with Gareth. They'd played football together before Tommy discovered he was better with electronics than blocking sleds. "Need a favor," Gareth said. Tommy looked up from a cracked iPhone screen. "What kind of favor?" Gareth placed Rowena's phone on the counter. She'd left it charging in the kitchen that morning, unusual for someone who normally clutched it like a life preserver. "Data recovery, recent deletions. Whose phone?" "Mine." Tommy raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He'd been in the data recovery business long enough to recognize a domestic situation. Cash up front, no questions, no judgment. "Give me 2 hours." Gareth drove to the public library and researched New York divorce law. Infidelity was still grounds for fault-based divorce in the state. It could affect property division and spousal support. He took notes on a legal pad, writing in the careful block letters he'd learned in the Army 20 years ago. His phone rang. "Tommy, you might want to see this." The photos were exactly what Gareth expected, and worse than he'd imagined. Rowena and Caleb in various states of undress. Timestamps going back 3 months. The metadata showed locations: the lakeside motel, a cabin in the Finger Lakes, even Caleb's office at the school. But it was the text messages that made Gareth's hands shake. "Rowena, can't wait to feel you inside me again. Caleb. Tonight after Maura falls asleep. Rowena. What if G finds out? Caleb. He won't. He's too trusting, Rowena. I feel bad sometimes, Caleb. Don't. You deserve better than a water plant worker. Rowena. What about Maura? Caleb. What about her? Gareth read every message twice. Then he paid Tommy $500 cash and drove home with copies of everything stored on 3 separate flash drives. Rowena was in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like chicken and herbs. She smiled when he walked in. How was your day, honey? Fine. Yours. Busy. Had to drive to Buffalo for a supplier meeting. She reached up to kiss his cheek. But I'm glad to be home. Gareth kissed her back and tasted lies. That night, after Rowena fell asleep, Gareth went to the basement and opened his father's old toolbox. Beneath the wrenches and screwdrivers, he found what he was looking for. A small digital recorder his dad had used for union meetings. Still worked. He also found the .38 revolver his father had kept for home protection. Still loaded. Gareth held the Colt for a long time, feeling its weight before putting it back. This wasn't that kind of revenge. This was going to be slower, more complete. The next morning, he called in sick to work and drove to downtown Rochester. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied the third floor of a glass building overlooking the Genesee River. Sarah Brennan was a family law attorney who'd graduated from Syracuse the same year as Rowena. They'd been sorority sisters. I need to discuss divorce proceedings, Gareth told the receptionist. Do you have an appointment? No, but I have cash and evidence. That got him 30 minutes with Brennan herself. She was sharp-eyed and professional, with the kind of confidence that came from winning ugly cases. Infidelity is difficult to prove, she said after reviewing the photos and messages. But this is about as clear-cut as it gets. What are you looking for in terms of settlement? Everything. Be more specific. Gareth had been thinking about this for 3 days. Full custody of our son, the house, her portion of my retirement funds, and I want her to pay my legal fees. The custody request might be problematic if she fights it. She won't. How can you be sure? Gareth smiled for the first time in a week, because she doesn't know I know yet. Sunday dinner at Maura's house was a tradition going back 5 years. The kids played video games in the basement while the adults ate and talked about work and weather and local politics. Gareth had always enjoyed these evenings. The sense of family, the easy laughter, the way Caleb would tell stories about difficult students and helicopter parents. Tonight felt different. Every glance between Rowena and Caleb carried weight. Every casual touch was loaded with meaning. When Caleb complimented Rowena's sweater, she blushed like a teenager. Maura didn't seem to notice. She was busy chasing her 5-year-old daughter around the kitchen and talking about the school board election. Caleb's thinking about running for president next year, she said, wiping applesauce off her daughter's face. I think he'd be perfect. I bet he would, Rowena said. Gareth watched his wife watch her lover and felt something cold settle in his chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was calculation. After dinner, Caleb offered to show Gareth his new workshop in the garage. They walked through the backyard in comfortable silence, their breath visible in the November air. You've been quiet tonight, Caleb said, flipping on the workshop lights. Everything okay? The workshop was impressive, professional-grade table saw, router, drill press, the kind of setup that costs serious money. Business is good? Gareth asked. What do you mean? The tools, the workshop. Vice principals don't usually make this kind of money. Caleb's smile tightened. Maura got a small inheritance from her aunt. We decided to invest in my woodworking. Another lie. Gareth had helped Maura with her taxes. There was no inheritance. That's nice, Gareth said. Family helping family. Exactly. They stood there looking at the tools. 2 men who'd shared Thanksgiving dinners and Super Bowl parties and Christmas mornings. 2 men who'd been friends for 15 years. I've been thinking about expanding the workshop, Caleb said. Maybe starting a small business, custom furniture. You know anyone who might be interested in investing? The audacity was breathtaking. Caleb was sleeping with his wife and asking for money in the same conversation. I'll keep my ears open, Gareth said. They walked back to the house. In the kitchen, Rowena was helping Maura load the dishwasher. She looked up when they entered, and Gareth saw her eyes dart between him and Caleb. We should get going, Rowena said. School night. On the drive home, she was unusually talkative. She chattered about Maura's new haircut and the gossip from her office, and a movie she wanted to see. Nervous energy disguised as normalcy. Did you and Caleb have a good talk? She asked. We talked about woodworking. That's nice. He's so talented with his hands. Gareth gripped the steering wheel tighter. The pregnancy test was positive. Gareth found it in the bathroom trash Tuesday morning, buried under tissues and cotton swabs. The little pink plus sign might as well have been a knife through his chest. He and Rowena hadn't been intimate in 6 weeks. She'd claimed stress, headaches, work deadlines, all the classic excuses for a woman who was getting satisfaction elsewhere. But a baby changed everything. DNA tests, child support, Custody battles that could drag on for years, unless the baby wasn't his. Gareth sat on the edge of the bathtub and did math in his head. If Rowena was pregnant now, conception would have been around mid-October, right when the photos on her phone started showing regular motel visits. He wrapped the test in toilet paper and put it in his jacket pocket. At work, he found himself staring at the water treatment controls without seeing them. The numbers and gauges blurred together while his mind calculated timelines and possibilities. Langley. Marcus was standing next to him, looking concerned. "You okay? You've been standing there for 10 minutes. "Sorry," distracted. "Maybe you should take some time off. You've got plenty of vacations saved up." "Maybe I will." That afternoon, Gareth drove to a private investigation office in Henrietta. The PI was a former cop named Janet Kowalski who specialized in domestic cases. Her office was small and cluttered, with a wall of certificates and a coffee machine that looked older than Gareth. "I need to establish paternity," he said. "Your wife pregnant?" "Yes." "You have reason to believe the child isn't yours." Gareth showed her the phone records and photos. Kowalski studied them with professional detachment. "This is solid evidence of an affair," she said. "But proving paternity before birth requires either an invasive procedure or cooperation from all parties." "What about after birth?" "Standard DNA test. Simple, accurate, court admissible." "How long do I have to request one?" "In New York, the presumed father has 2 years to challenge paternity. But if you wait too long, you might be on the hook for child support regardless of biology." Gareth wrote her a check for $2,000. "I want surveillance on both of them. Photos, locations, timeline. Everything you can get." "How long?" "Until I say stop." Rowena told him about the pregnancy 3 days later. She chose the moment carefully. Saturday morning after breakfast with Louis playing in the backyard. She sat on the couch next to him and took his hand. "I have news," she said. Gareth looked into her brown eyes and saw excitement mixed with fear. She was a good actress. He'd give her that. "What kind of news?" "I'm pregnant." He pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried happy tears into his shoulder. He made the right sounds, asked the right questions, expressed the right amount of joy and surprise. "How far along?" he asked. "About 6 weeks." The timeline fit, mid-October, right when her affair had intensified. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Of course. Another baby. That's wonderful." She pulled back to look at his face. "I was worried you might think we were too old." 38 isn't too old. "I meant me. 35 is considered advanced maternal age." Advanced maternal age. She'd been researching, planning. This pregnancy wasn't an accident. "You'll be fine," he said. "We'll be fine." That night they made love for the first time in 2 months. Rowena was passionate and attentive, as if the pregnancy had rekindled something between them. Gareth performed his part while his mind cataloged every lie she'd told, every betrayal she'd committed. Afterward, she fell asleep with her head on his chest. Gareth stared at the ceiling and planned her destruction. The surveillance photos arrived by email every few days. Rowena and Caleb at the Finger Lakes cabin. Rowena and Caleb at a restaurant in Canandaigua. Rowena and Caleb in the parking lot behind the school, her hands on his face, his hands on her pregnant belly. Gareth printed each photo and stored them in a folder labeled insurance papers in his desk drawer. He also opened a new bank account and began transferring money in small amounts. Not enough to trigger alerts, but enough to matter. The house was in both their names, but Gareth had inherited it from his mother. New York law protected inherited property from division in divorce, especially with evidence of infidelity. His retirement account was different. That would be split unless he could prove Rowena's infidelity had caused financial damage. He could prove that. In December, Rowena started showing. Just a small bump that she hid under loose sweaters, but Gareth noticed. He also noticed how often she worked late, how frequently she had supplier meetings in other cities, how her phone was always face down on the table. The lies were getting more elaborate. She told him she was attending a weekend conference in Albany. Kowalski's surveillance showed her checking into the Lakeside Motel with Caleb on Friday afternoon and not leaving until Sunday morning. Gareth spent that weekend building a crib in the nursery. He painted the walls pale yellow gender neutral, Rowena had requested. He assembled the changing table and the rocking chair. He hung pictures of happy families and sleeping babies. When Rowena came home Sunday night, she found him reading assembly instructions for a mobile with dancing elephants. "You've been busy," she said. "Wanted to surprise you." She kissed him and told him he was the sweetest husband in the world. Then she went to shower off the smell of another man. Christmas dinner was at Gareth's house. Maura and Caleb brought their daughter and enough food for an army. Louis was excited about his new Nintendo Switch and spent most of the day teaching his 5-year-old cousin how to play Mario Kart. The adults sat around the living room, full of ham and wine and seasonal contentment. Rowena was 17 weeks pregnant and glowing with that particular radiance that made everyone smile and offer unsolicited advice. "You're carrying high," Maura observed. "I bet it's a girl." "We'll find out next month," Rowena said. "Have you picked names?" Caleb asked. The question hung in the air for a moment. Gareth watched his wife's face as she processed the loaded nature of the inquiry. "We're still discussing it," she said carefully. "I always like traditional names," Caleb continued. "Strong names with history." "Like Caleb?" Maura laughed. "You're not biased at all." "It's a good name," Rowena said quietly. Gareth excused himself to get more wine from the kitchen. Caleb followed a few minutes later, claiming he needed ice for his drink. They stood at the kitchen island, two men with the same secret pretending to care about ice cubes. "Rowena looks wonderful," Caleb said. "Pregnancy suits her. You must be excited. Another child." "Thrilled." Caleb opened the freezer and scooped ice into his glass. His hands were steady, but Gareth could see tension in his shoulders. "It's funny," Caleb said. "I've been thinking about having another baby too. Maura and I have been trying." "Is that right?" "A man wants to leave something behind, a legacy." Gareth smiled and felt it cut like broken glass. "Some legacies are worth more than others." They rejoined the others in the living room. For the rest of the evening, Gareth played the perfect host. He served dessert and coffee, helped with the dishes, hugged everyone goodbye. He watched Caleb kiss Rowena's cheek in farewell, a touch that lasted half a second too long, and said nothing. After everyone left, Rowena and Louis went to bed early. Gareth stayed downstairs, staring at the Christmas tree and making final plans. January was brutal, the kind of Western New York winter that reminded you why people moved to Florida. Snow fell almost daily, and the temperature stayed below freezing for 3 weeks straight. Rowena's morning sickness kicked in with a vengeance. She spent most mornings throwing up and most afternoons napping. Her evening work meetings became more frequent and longer in duration. Gareth took care of everything. He made breakfast and packed lunches. He helped Louis with homework and drove him to basketball practice. He did laundry and grocery shopping and housework. He played the devoted husband so convincingly that even he almost believed it. The 20-week ultrasound revealed a healthy baby girl. Rowena cried when she saw the image on the screen, her hands pressed to her mouth in wonder and joy. "She's perfect," she whispered. Gareth held her hand and agreed. The baby did look perfect. She also looked exactly like Caleb's daughter had at the same stage of development. That night, Rowena called Maura to share the news. Gareth listened from the kitchen as she described the ultrasound, the baby's strong heartbeat, how active she was. "We're thinking about naming her Grace," Rowena said. Grace, not a name they'd ever discussed. "Caleb suggested it," Rowena continued. "He said it means divine favor." Gareth gripped the kitchen counter until his knuckles went white. The next morning, he called in sick to work and drove to Buffalo. He spent 4 hours in the offices of Morrison, Klein, and Associates, the most aggressive family law firm in Western New York. Richard Klein was a shark in an expensive suit who had made his reputation destroying cheating spouses in court. His consultation fee was $500 for an hour. "You have excellent documentation," Klein said after reviewing the evidence. "Photos, text messages, financial records, witness statements from the private investigator. This is a prosecutor's dream. What can I expect? With infidelity this well documented, full custody of your son, the house, your retirement funds intact, and she pays your legal fees, possibly spousal support from her to you depending on income disparity. What about the baby? That's trickier. If paternity testing proves the child isn't yours, you have no financial responsibility. But if you don't challenge paternity immediately after birth, the court might consider you the presumed father regardless of biology. So I need to act fast. The moment that baby is born." Gareth wrote another check and drove home through blowing snow. He had everything he needed except one thing, the perfect moment for maximum destruction. The moment came in March. Rowena was 28 weeks pregnant and starting to waddle. She'd been working late 3 nights a week for the past month, always returning home with the smell of Zex and guilt perfume. Gareth had been tracking their movements through Kowalski's surveillance and the GPS tracker on Caleb's car. They had a routine now. Wednesday and Friday afternoons at the Lakeside Motel. Sunday mornings at the Finger Lakes cabin while Maura took her daughter to church. It was a Sunday morning when everything converged. Gareth was supposed to be at the hardware store buying materials for a backyard fence. Instead, he was sitting in his truck outside the cabin, watching Caleb's Honda in the driveway and waiting for the right moment. His phone rang. Maura. Gareth? I'm so sorry to bother you, but I can't find Caleb anywhere. He said he was going to run errands, but his car isn't at any of the usual places. Maybe he went somewhere different? Maybe. It's just, I'm worried. He's been acting strange lately, distracted, and we had a fight last night about money. He's been spending a lot without telling me where it goes. Gareth looked at the cabin where his pregnant wife was having sex with his sister's husband and felt something dark and final settle in his chest. I'm sure he's fine, Gareth said. But if you're really worried, I could help you look for him. Would you? I know it's silly, but I have this feeling. Not silly at all. Family helps family. Thank you. I'm at the church on Elm Street. Emma's in Sunday school until noon. I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. Gareth drove to the church and found Maura pacing in the parking lot. She looked tired and stressed with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and growing suspicions. I'm probably overreacting, she said as she got into his truck. Where do you think he might be? I called his office, the school, even the coffee shop where he likes to grade papers. Nothing. What about that cabin he mentioned? The one he rents for weekend woodworking projects? Maura looked confused. What cabin? On the lake. He told me he rents it sometimes when he needs space to work on big pieces. Caleb doesn't do woodworking at a cabin. All his tools are in our garage. They looked at each other in silence. Gareth could see the moment when suspicion crystallized into certainty in his sister's eyes. Where is this cabin? She asked quietly. The Honda was still in the driveway when they arrived. Gareth parked behind it, blocking any escape route. Maybe I should wait in the truck, Maura said. Maybe you should see what your husband does on Sunday mornings. They walked to the front door together. Gareth had a key. Kowalski had obtained it through methods he didn't ask about, but it turned out he didn't need it. The door was unlocked. The cabin was small and rustic, with a stone fireplace and windows overlooking the lake. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. Clothes were scattered across the living room floor. A woman's sweater, a man's shirt, jeans, underwear. Maura picked up the sweater and held it like it might bite her. This is Rowena's, she whispered. The bathroom door opened. Caleb emerged wearing only a towel, his hair still wet from the shower. He was smiling and relaxed until he saw them standing in the living room. The color drained from his face. Maura. Gareth. I can explain. Where is she? Gareth asked calmly. Caleb's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Where is who? The bedroom door opened. Rowena walked out wearing one of Caleb's shirts and nothing else. Her pregnant belly was prominent beneath the thin fabric. She saw Gareth and Maura and stopped moving entirely. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind through the trees outside and the distant lap of water against the shore. Maura looked at her husband and her sister-in-law and the scattered clothes and the unmade bed visible through the open bedroom door. She looked at Rowena's pregnant belly and did math in her head. How long? She asked. Rowena started to cry. How long? Maura asked again, louder. 6 months, Caleb said quietly. Maura laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. 6 months. My daughter asks me every night why Daddy doesn't play with her anymore. My friends at church tell me how lucky I am to have such a devoted husband. And you've been here, with her, for 6 months. She turned to Rowena. Is the baby his? Rowena couldn't meet her eyes. Is the baby his? Maura screamed. Yes, Rowena whispered. Gareth felt something inside him detach completely. The last thread connecting him to the man he'd been for 38 years snapped like a rotten rope. Get dressed, he told Rowena. Both of you. Gareth, please, Caleb started. Get dressed. They retreated to the bedroom. Gareth could hear urgent whispers and the rustle of clothing. Maura stood in the middle of the living room, staring at nothing. I'm sorry, Gareth said. You knew, didn't you? That's why we're here. Yes. How long have you known? Since October. 4 months. You've known for 4 months and didn't tell me. I needed to be sure. Sure of what? That my husband was screwing your wife? That he got her pregnant? What else did you need to be sure of? Rowena and Caleb emerged from the bedroom, fully dressed but disheveled. They looked like what they were, two people who'd been caught in the worst possible way. We should talk about this rationally, Caleb said. Like adults. Gareth kicked him. It wasn't a calculated punch or a strategic blow. It was pure animal rage exploding from months of control and calculation and careful planning. His fist connected with Caleb's nose and sent him stumbling backward into the stone fireplace. Blood poured down Caleb's face and onto his shirt. Gareth, stop. Rowena moved between them, her hands raised protectively. Don't, Gareth said quietly. Don't you dare try to protect him from me. Think about the baby. I am thinking about the baby. I'm thinking about how she's going to grow up knowing her father is a liar and her mother is a hooker. Rowena slapped him. Hard. Gareth smiled. Feel better? He asked. Then he turned to Maura. We should go. Emma will be getting out of Sunday school soon. They left Caleb and Rowena in the cabin and drove back to town in silence. Gareth dropped Maura at the church and watched her collect her daughter with shaking hands and a trembling smile. That afternoon, he called Richard Klein. It's time, he said. The divorce papers were served at Rowena's office on Tuesday morning. She called Gareth immediately, her voice shaking with panic and rage. What the hell is this? Legal documents. I thought that would be obvious. You can't do this. I'm pregnant. With another man's baby. You don't know that. I have photos of you and Caleb at 3 different locations over 6 months. I have text messages discussing when and where to meet. I have financial records showing money you spent on hotel rooms, and I have a timeline that proves conception occurred during the period of your most active infidelity. Silence on the other end of the line. I also have surveillance footage of you entering and leaving his office at the school after hours. Did you know the district installed security cameras last fall? Gareth, please, we can work this out. No, we can't. What about Louis? You're going to tear apart his family over this? You tore apart his family. I'm just documenting it for the court. She hung up. An hour later, Caleb called. We need to talk. No, we don't. I can explain everything. Can you explain why you've been having sex with my wife? Can you explain why you got her pregnant? Can you explain why you asked me for money while you were planning to destroy my marriage? It wasn't planned, it just happened. For 6 months, it just happened. Look, I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Caleb. Angry is what I was in October when I first found out. Now I'm something else entirely. What do you want? Money? I can pay you. I want you to lose everything. Your job, your marriage, your reputation, your future. I want you to understand what it feels like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. That's not going to help anyone. It's going to help me. Gareth hung up and called the school district's administrative office. I have information about inappropriate conduct by a staff member, he told the receptionist. The photographs were delivered to the school board president, the superintendent, and the head of the PTA simultaneously. Professional prints in manila envelopes, with typed summaries of dates, times, and locations. Caleb was suspended pending investigation within 24 hours. The story spread through town like wildfire. Small communities thrived on scandal, and this was better than most soap operas. The vice principal and the water plant worker's pregnant wife, secret meetings and motel rooms and family betrayal. Gareth went to work every day and endured the stares and whispers with professional composure. He checked chlorine levels and monitored filtration systems while his co-workers speculated about his marriage and his mental state. You holding up okay? Marcus asked. Fine. If you need time off, I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. He was something beyond fine, beyond anger, beyond hurt. He was methodical and relentless and completely focused on the systematic destruction of everyone who had betrayed him. The custody hearing was scheduled for May. Gareth's lawyer was confident about the outcome. With documented infidelity and a pregnancy that's almost certainly not yours, we should get everything you're asking for, Klein said. Full custody, the house, financial independence. She'll be lucky to get supervised visitation. What about criminal charges? For infidelity? New York doesn't prosecute that anymore. Not infidelity, fraud. She's been using our joint credit cards to pay for hotel rooms where she meets her lover. That's theft of marital assets. Klein smiled. That's creative. I like it. Gareth also filed complaints with the state education department and the district attorney's office. Caleb had used his position of authority to conduct an affair, violated his employment contract, and potentially committed crimes involving school property. The net was tightening. Rowena moved out in April. She packed her clothes and personal items while Gareth was at work, leaving only a note on the kitchen table. "I'm staying with my sister in Buffalo until the baby comes. I know you hate me, but please don't take it out on her. She's innocent in all this." Rowena Gareth crumpled the note and threw it away. Then he changed the locks and canceled her access to their joint accounts. That evening, Louis asked where his mother had gone. "She's staying somewhere else for a while," Gareth said. "Because of the baby? Because of choices she made? Is she coming back?" Gareth looked at his son, this serious, intelligent boy who was about to learn that the world was more complicated and cruel than 9-year-olds should have to understand. "No," he said. "She's not coming back." Louis nodded like he'd expected that answer. "Are you sad?" "I'm a lot of things. Sad is one of them. Me too." They ordered pizza and watched a movie about superheroes saving the world from an alien invasion. Simple problems with simple solutions. Good guys and bad guys and clear moral lines. At bedtime, Louis hugged him extra tight. "I'm glad you're still here, Dad. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise." The baby was born on a rainy Thursday in late May. Grace Elizabeth, 7 pounds 3 ounces, healthy and perfect according to the text message Gareth received from Maura. He didn't respond. On Friday morning, he drove to Buffalo General Hospital with a court order for immediate paternity testing. Richard Klein met him in the lobby with a hospital administrator and a court-appointed genetic counselor. "This is highly unusual," the administrator said. "The mother is refusing to cooperate." "She doesn't have a choice," Klein replied, showing the court order. Judge Morrison was very clear about the timeline requirements. They rode the elevator to the maternity ward in tense silence. Gareth could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, but his hands were steady. Everything depended on the next hour. Rowena's room was at the end of the hall. Through the open door, Gareth could see her holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink blankets. She looked exhausted and pale, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that hadn't been brushed in days. She looked up when they entered, and her face went white. "You can't be here," she said. "Court order says otherwise," Klein replied, handing her the papers. Rowena read the document with shaking hands. "This is vindictive. She's 2 days old. The law requires paternity challenges to be filed within 48 hours of birth," the genetic counselor explained. "After that, Mr. Langley could be considered the legal father regardless of biology." "Where's Caleb?" Gareth asked. He couldn't," Rowena's voice broke. "His wife filed for divorce yesterday. He's staying at a motel." "So he abandoned you?" "He didn't abandon me. He's scared." "He should be." The testing took 15 minutes, a simple cheek swab from the baby and a blood sample from Gareth. The genetic counselor labeled everything carefully and sealed the samples in official containers. "Results will be available in 72 hours, she said. Gareth looked at the baby one last time. Grace had Caleb's nose and Rowena's chin and eyes that might have been either parents. She was beautiful and innocent and doomed to grow up as the product of betrayal and selfishness. "She looks like him," Gareth said quietly. "You don't know that." "I know." He left without saying goodbye. The DNA results confirmed what everyone already knew. Caleb Renner was Grace's biological father with 99.97% certainty. Gareth Langley had no genetic relationship to the child. Klein filed the results with the family court immediately. Within 24 hours, Gareth was legally absolved of any financial responsibility for Grace. No child support, no medical expenses, no college fund obligations. "Clean as a whistle," Klein said over the phone. "You're officially not the father." The custody hearing for Louis was scheduled for the following week. Klein was confident. With the paternity results and documented infidelity, plus her abandonment of the marital home while pregnant with another man's child, she has no realistic claim to primary custody. What about visitation? Supervised visits, maybe every other weekend. The judge won't want to completely sever the mother-child relationship, but her conduct makes unsupervised access unlikely. Gareth hung up and stared out his kitchen window at the backyard, where he'd planned to build a swing set for Grace. The lumber was still stacked against the garage, covered with a tarp and slowly rotting in the spring rain. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Gareth? It's Caleb." Gareth almost hung up, but curiosity won. "What do you want?" To apologize, to explain, to see if we can work something out. Work what out? She's not doing well. The baby needs medical care, specialized formula. I lost my job and my insurance. Maura won't let me see Emma. I'm living in a Motel 6 and working at a gas station. Sounds like consequences. I know I hurt you. I know what we did was wrong, but Grace is innocent in all this. Grace isn't my problem. She could have been, if things had been different. Things weren't different. You made sure of that. I'm asking for help, as one father to another. You're not a father, Caleb. You're a seed donor who destroyed 2 families. Fathers take responsibility. Fathers protect their children. Fathers don't abandon pregnant women in hospital rooms. I didn't abandon her. I'm trying to figure out how to support them. Try harder. Gareth hung up. That evening, he drove past the Motel 6 on the east side of town. Caleb's Honda was parked outside room 127, looking dented and dirty. The once proud vice principal who'd lectured students about responsibility and character was living in a $40 a night room and pumping gas for minimum wage. It felt like justice. The custody hearing was a formality. Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence, the photographs, the text messages, the paternity results, the timeline of abandonment, and made his decision in less than an hour. Given the documented infidelity, the fraudulent paternity claim, and the respondent's abandonment of the marital home, and her son to pursue a relationship with her lover, I'm awarding full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Louis Langley, to the petitioner. Rowena sat next to her court-appointed attorney and wept silently. She'd lost weight since giving birth and looked fragile in her ill-fitting dress. The respondent will be granted supervised visitation every other Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., pending successful completion of parenting classes and psychological evaluation. Your Honor, Rowena's attorney said, my client is a new mother dealing with postpartum issues. The supervised visitation requirement seems excessive. Your client committed infidelity, became pregnant by her lover, attempted to defraud my client into believing he was the father, and abandoned her son to live with her paramour. Supervised visitation is generous under the circumstances. Judge Morrison signed the order and handed it to the bailiff. Mr. Langley, you have full custody effective immediately. Ms. Langley, you have 14 days to arrange your first supervised visit through the court's Family Services Office. Outside the courthouse, Rowena caught up with Gareth in the parking lot. Please, she said, don't take Louis away from me completely. I didn't take him away. You gave him up when you chose Caleb over your family. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting to buy milk or missing a school event. What you did was a choice, a series of choices over 6 months. I can't change what happened. No, you can't. But I can be a better mother going forward, if you give me a chance. Gareth looked at this woman he'd loved for 12 years, this woman who'd shared his bed and his hopes and his plans for the future. She looked smaller now, diminished by consequences and reality. You'll get your supervised visits, he said, every other Saturday. Don't miss them. And after that, if I complete the classes and the evaluation? We'll see. But they both knew there would be no after that. The trust was gone, the family was broken, and some things couldn't be repaired. Summer passed quietly. Gareth worked his shifts at the treatment plant and spent evenings with Louis. They went to baseball games and movies and the lake on weekends. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt their life as a family of 2. Louis adapted with the resilience of children. He missed his mother, but didn't ask when she was coming home anymore. He attended his supervised visits without complaint, but never talked about them afterwards. How was your day with Mom? Gareth would ask. Okay, Louis would answer. And that was enough. Rowena looked more tired each time Gareth saw her at the Family Services Office. The demands of caring for a newborn alone, working part-time at a retail job, and attending court-mandated classes were wearing her down. She'd moved into a small apartment in Buffalo with her sister, but Gareth knew from the divorce proceedings that her finances were stretched thin. Caleb had disappeared entirely. His gas station job had lasted 3 weeks before he was fired for showing up drunk. Maura had filed a restraining order after he'd tried to contact Emma at school. The last anyone had heard, he was living in a homeless shelter in Syracuse. Justice, it turned out, was a slow-moving but thorough process. In August, Gareth received a call from Janet Kowalski. Thought you should know, the private investigator said. Caleb Renner was arrested in Oneida County yesterday. Public intoxication and failure to pay child support. How much does he owe? $15,000. Court ordered him to pay support for Grace starting in June. He hasn't made a single payment. Gareth felt a spike of satisfaction. What's his situation now? 60 days in county lockup. When he gets out, he still owes the money plus penalties. And if he doesn't pay then, it's back to jail. What about Rowena and the baby? State assistance, food stamps, WIC, Medicaid. She applied for everything available. After Kowalski hung up, Gareth sat in his kitchen and tried to feel something other than grim satisfaction. These were people he'd once cared about, people who'd shared his table and his holidays and his trust. Now, they were scattered and broken, dealing with consequences he'd helped engineer. He searched his conscience for regret and found none. That evening, he took Louis out for ice cream at the Dairy Queen near the lake. They sat at a picnic table and watched boats come and go while the sun set over the water. "Dad," Louis said between bites of his sundae. "Yeah? Are you happy now?" The question caught Gareth off guard. "What do you mean?" "You seem different. Calmer, I guess. Like you're not worried about stuff anymore." Gareth considered the question seriously. Was he happy? The words seemed too simple for what he felt. Relief, yes. Satisfaction, definitely. A sense that justice had been served and balance restored. But happiness? "I'm content," he said finally. "I know where I stand and what I'm responsible for. That's worth something." "Good," Louis said. "You deserve to be content." They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence, watching the lake turn gold in the fading light. The final confrontation came in September. Gareth was leaving the grocery store with a week's worth of supplies when he saw a familiar figure pushing a shopping cart in the parking lot. Caleb looked 20 pounds thinner and 10 years older. His clothes were wrinkled and cheap, his hair longer than he'd worn it in years. Their eyes met across the asphalt. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Caleb began walking toward him with the deliberate pace of someone who'd been planning this conversation for months. Gareth, Caleb. They stood between their cars like gunfighters in an old western, measuring each other's intentions. "You look good," Caleb said. "Healthy. Prison food didn't agree with you. 60 days in county lockup for a debt I can't pay because I can't find work because you destroyed my reputation. I documented your behavior. You destroyed your own reputation. Fair enough." Caleb shifted his weight, wincing slightly. "I'm not here to argue about who's to blame." "Then why are you here?" "To ask you to stop." "Stop what?" "Whatever you're planning next. I know you, Gareth. You're methodical, patient. You plan things through to the end. This isn't the end." Gareth loaded groceries into his truck while he considered his response. "What makes you think there's more?" "Because I'm still breathing." The words hung in the air between them. Gareth slammed his tailgate shut and turned to face Caleb directly. "You think I want to eliminate you? I think you want to destroy me completely. Passing would be quicker than what you've done so far. What I've done is hold you accountable for your choices by systematically dismantling every aspect of my life. My job, my marriage, my relationship with my daughter, my housing, my income, my freedom. That's not accountability, Gareth. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing." Caleb laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You want to know something funny? I used to admire you, your steadiness, your loyalty, the way you took care of everyone around you without expecting credit or recognition. Used to. Now, I think you're the most dangerous man I've ever met. Because you convinced everyone, including yourself, that you're the good guy in this story. I am the good guy. Good guys don't spend months planning the systematic destruction of people's lives. Good guys protect their families from people who would hurt them." "Is that what you tell yourself? That this is all about protecting Louis?" Gareth stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in Caleb's eyes. "This is about justice. You took something that wasn't yours. You lied about it. You involved innocent people. And when you got caught, you ran like a coward. I made mistakes. You made choices. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment you decided your pleasure was more important than the people who trusted you. Those were choices. And now you're making choices too. Choices about how far to push this, how much damage is enough. I'll let you know when I reach that point." Caleb's composure finally cracked. "For God's sake, Gareth, I lost everything. My job, my wife, my daughter, my home. I'm working at a McDonald's and sleeping in my car. Rowena is on welfare with a baby. How much more do you want? I want you to understand what it feels like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. I want you to wake up every morning knowing that everything you lost was a direct result of your own selfishness. I want you to spend the rest of your life paying for what you did to my family. And when that happens, when I'm completely broken and Rowena is destitute and Grace grows up in poverty, will that make you feel better? Gareth smiled, and it was the coldest expression Caleb had ever seen. Yes, he said. It will. Caleb stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. You're not the man I thought you were. No, Gareth agreed. I'm the man you made me. He got into his truck and drove away, leaving Caleb standing alone in the parking lot. Winter came early that year. By Halloween, there was snow on the ground and ice forming at the edges of the lake. Gareth and Louie settled into new routines. Homework at the kitchen table, weekend trips to the indoor climbing gym, Friday night movies with pizza and soda. Rowena's supervised visits became sporadic. She missed 3 in November, claiming illness or work conflicts. When she did come, she looked increasingly haggard and distracted. The court-appointed supervisor noted in her reports that Missy Langley seemed overwhelmed by the demands of single parenthood and showed signs of depression. She asked about you last Saturday, Louis told Gareth after one visit. What did she ask? If you were dating anyone, if you seemed happy, if you ever talked about her. What did you tell her? That you don't talk about her and that you seem okay. Gareth ruffled his son's hair. Good answer. But that night, alone in his bedroom, Gareth found himself thinking about Rowena. Not the woman who'd betrayed him, but the woman he'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. The young logistics coordinator who'd laughed at his jokes and admired his practical nature. The woman who'd cried happy tears when she found out she was pregnant with Louis. That woman was gone, destroyed by choices and consequences just as surely as his marriage had been destroyed. What remained was a shell-tired, broken, struggling to survive in a world that had become too complicated and harsh for someone who'd never learned to live with the results of her actions. He felt a moment of something that might have been pity. Then he remembered the photographs and the lies and the way she'd looked at Caleb during family dinners, and the moment passed. The end came in December, sudden and final as a car accident. Gareth was wrapping Christmas presents in the living room when his phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized the area code. Buffalo. Mr. Langley? This is Dr. Sarah Chen at Buffalo General Hospital. I'm calling about Rowena Langley. Gareth's blood went cold. What happened? She was brought in this morning by ambulance. Pill overdose, prescription painkillers mixed with booze. Is she... She's alive, but in critical condition. We have her sedated and on life support while we assess organ function. What about the baby? Grace is with Child Protective Services. Miss Langley's sister was unable to take custody due to her own legal issues. Gareth closed his eyes and saw the last 15 months play out like a movie and fast forward. Every decision, every consequence, every moment that had led to this phone call. Mr. Langley? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. Miss Langley had you listed as her emergency contact. I know you're divorced, but I'll be there in an hour. He hung up and stared at the half-wrapped presents scattered across the coffee table. Louis was at a sleepover at his friend Jake's house. Gareth called Jake's mother and explained there was a family emergency, asked if Louis could stay overnight. Then he drove to Buffalo through falling snow, thinking about choices and consequences and the point where justice became cruelty. Rowena looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and kept her alive. Her face was pale and peaceful, free from the stress and exhaustion that had marked it for months. Dr. Chen was young and serious, with the kind of professional compassion that came from delivering bad news regularly. The overdose caused significant liver damage, she explained. We're monitoring kidney function as well. The next 48 hours will be critical. Was it intentional? Hard to say. She'd been prescribed pain medication for back problems related to carrying the baby. The booze suggests either poor judgment or deliberate intention. What happens to Grace if Miss Langley doesn't recover? CPS will place her in foster care pending a search for suitable relatives. The biological father is in jail, yes, and his parental rights may be terminated due to abandonment and failure to provide support. Gareth sat in the chair next to Rowena's bed and watched her breathe with mechanical assistance. This woman had been his wife for 12 years. She'd given birth to his son. She'd shared his bed and his dreams and his plans for the future. Now she was dying, alone except for machines and the ex-husband she'd betrayed. Her purse was on the bedside table. Inside, Gareth found her phone and wallet and a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and found a letter in Rowena's handwriting. Gareth, I know you'll never forgive me for what I did to our family. I don't expect you to. I don't even forgive myself. I was selfish and stupid, and I hurt the people I was supposed to love most. I destroyed Louis's family and ruined your life and created a mess that can't be fixed. Grace deserves better than a mother who can barely take care of herself. She deserves better than growing up poor and ashamed, paying for mistakes she didn't make. I'm tired of fighting and failing and disappointing everyone. I'm tired of being the villain in everyone's story, including my own. Please don't let Louis remember me as the woman who left him. Let him remember the mother who loved him before I became someone else. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry I wasn't the wife you deserved or the mother our children needed. Rowena Gareth read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in her purse. He sat with her through the night, watching monitors and listening to machines breathe for her. Nurses came and went, checking vital signs and adjusting medications. Dr. Chen stopped by every few hours with updates that grew progressively grimmer. Dawn was breaking over Lake Erie when the machines started alarming. Nurses rushed in, followed by doctors, but there was nothing to be done. Rowena's liver had failed completely, and her other organs were shutting down in sequence. She died at 6:47 a.m. on December 15th without regaining consciousness. Dr. Chen spoke the official words about time of end and organ failure, but Gareth wasn't really listening. He was thinking about the letter and the baby in foster care and the boy sleeping peacefully at his friend's house who would wake up to learn that his mother was gone forever. Mr. Langley? Dr. Chen was looking at him with concern. Are you all right? Fine, he said automatically. I need to make some phone calls. He walked to the hospital parking lot and stood in the cold December air, trying to feel something other than empty. Rowena was dead. Caleb was in jail. Maura was divorcing her husband and struggling to rebuild her life. Grace was in foster care. The revenge was complete. Justice had been served. Balance had been restored. So why did it feel like losing? Louis took the news with the same quiet strength he'd shown throughout the divorce. He cried for a while, asked some questions about what would happen next, then went to his room to process privately. The funeral was small. Rowena's sister from Buffalo, a few coworkers from her retail job, Maura and her daughter. Caleb was still in county lockup and couldn't attend. Gareth sat in the front pew with Louis and listened to a minister who'd never met Rowena talk about forgiveness and redemption and the complexity of human nature. The words felt hollow and performative, but they filled the silence that would have been worse. After the service, Maura approached him in the parking lot. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? For taking care of the arrangements, for letting her be buried with dignity. She was Louis's mother. She was also the woman who destroyed our family. You could have let her sister handle everything. Gareth looked at his sister, noting how much older she looked than her 36 years. The divorce and scandal had aged her, but there was something stronger in her face now, something that hadn't been there when she was married to Caleb. How are you doing? He asked. Better. Emma and I are moving to Albany next month. I got a teaching position at a private school. Fresh start. That's good. What about you? What happens now? Gareth considered the question. What did happen now? The war was over, the enemy was defeated, but peace felt stranger than he'd expected. Now I raise my son and try to remember how to live without rage. Maura hugged him, something she hadn't done since before everything fell apart. Take care of yourself, Gareth, and take care of Louis. I will. She walked away, leaving Gareth standing alone in the cemetery parking lot. Snow was beginning to fall again, covering the ground with fresh white that made everything look clean and new. Christmas came and went quietly. Gareth and Louis opened presents and cooked a turkey and watched movies by the fireplace. They didn't talk about Rowena or the empty chair at the table or the gifts that would never be opened. On New Year's Eve, they drove to the lake and stood on the dock where Gareth had proposed to Rowena 13 years earlier. The water was frozen now, covered with ice that stretched to the horizon. Dad? Louis said. Yeah? Do you think Mom loved me? The question hit Gareth like a physical blow. He looked at his son, this serious, thoughtful boy who'd inherited his mother's eyes and his father's steady temperament. Yes, he said without hesitation. She loved you more than anything in the world. More than herself, certainly more than me. Then why did she leave? because she made mistakes that felt too big to fix, because she was ashamed and scared and didn't know how to make things right. Do you miss her? Gareth thought about the woman who'd kissed him goodbye every morning for 12 years. The woman who'd held his hand during scary movies and cried at wedding scenes and insisted on putting extra cheese on everything. I miss who she used to be, he said finally. Before everything went wrong, they stood in comfortable silence, watching their breath form clouds in the cold air. Dad? Yeah? I'm glad you're my father. Gareth pulled his son close and held him tight. Me too, buddy. Me too. Spring brought news about Grace. Child Protective Services had found a suitable placement with a young couple in Rochester who'd been trying to adopt for years. The paperwork was being processed, and if everything went smoothly, the adoption would be finalized by summer. Gareth found himself thinking about the baby more than he'd expected. She was innocent in all this, a sufferer of her parents' choices and her father's cowardice. She would grow up knowing nothing about the scandal that surrounded her birth, the betrayals that created her, the revenge that orphaned her. Maybe that was better. Maybe ignorance was kinder than truth in some cases. Caleb was released from jail in March, but he didn't return to their town. Word filtered back through various sources that he'd moved to North Carolina, where he was working construction and living in a trailer park. His parental rights to Grace had been terminated after he failed to contest the adoption proceedings. Some stories didn't have endings, just fading away into distance and time. 1 year after Rowena's passing, Gareth drove to the cemetery alone. He brought flowers, not because he'd forgiven her, but because Louis wasn't old enough to visit his mother's grave by himself yet. The headstone was simple gray granite with her name and dates and a line from a poem she'd liked. She was more than the sum of her mistakes. Gareth arranged the flowers and stood quietly for a few minutes. He tried to feel something: grief, anger, regret, closure, but mostly he felt tired. I won, he said to the stone. I got everything I wanted. Full custody, the house, your reputation destroyed, Caleb's life ruined. I won completely. A robin landed on the headstone and looked at him curiously. So why doesn't it feel like victory? The robin flew away without answering. Gareth walked back to his truck and drove home to make dinner for his son. Louis was 14 now, taller and more serious than most boys his age. He played guitar and wrote stories and asked thoughtful questions about life and end and the complicated nature of human relationships. How was your day? Louis asked as they sat down to eat. Good. Productive? Yours? Fine. Jake's parents are getting divorced. I'm sorry to hear that. He asked me what it was like, having divorced parents. What did you tell him? That it's sad, but not the end of the world. That sometimes people aren't supposed to be married to each other, even if they have kids together. Gareth looked at his son and felt something shift in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or hope. That's very wise. I also told him that some parents love their kids more than they love their own anger. The words hung in the air between them. Louis continued eating his spaghetti as if he hadn't just delivered a profound judgment on his father's choices. Is that what you think I did? Gareth asked quietly. Loved you more than my anger? Louis considered the question seriously. I think you loved me enough to be angry on my behalf, but I also think you held onto that anger longer than you needed to. And now? Now I think you're tired of being angry, and maybe ready to try being something else. Gareth reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. When did you get so smart? I had a good teacher. That night, Gareth sat on his back porch and thought about choices and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. He thought about the man he'd been before Rowena's betrayal and the man he'd become after it. He thought about the future he was building with his son and whether that future had room for forgiveness. Not forgiveness for Rowena or Caleb. They were beyond the reach of forgiveness now. But forgiveness for himself, for the choices he'd made in anger, for the systematic destruction he'd engineered, for the satisfaction he'd taken in watching people suffer. The stars were bright above the lake, infinite and indifferent to human pain and human healing alike. Gareth sat under them until dawn, planning a different kind of future, one where justice and mercy could coexist, where consequences didn't have to mean cruelty, where a man could protect his family without destroying his own soul. When the sun rose over the water, Gareth Langley walked inside to wake his son and start a new day. The old Gareth, the methodical, patient man who'd spent months planning perfect revenge, was gone. What remained was a father who'd learned the difference between winning and being right. And sometimes, that was enough.